We do not own the rights to anything or any music that's heard during the duration of this podcast. Also, a lot of these shows will have explicit content. So if you are not a fan of any cursing or profanity, you may want to walk away, but that does not mean that every show will consist of such.
Are you serious? Like, we at season 7, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seasons. Yeah, season 7. Magic number. If you know, you know. I'm not gonna go in depth with that, but yeah, this will be a very positive season. I don't know why and what's making me say that, but everything's changed. Everything is a lot different. I know the title you'll still see the podcast about sports and stuff, but yeah, I ain't gonna get no sports. Correction, you will still get sports because this is still called a podcast about sports and stuff. Just want to add that in there. I'm still, like I said, stuff is very fluctuating now. I found that the connection with things is to get people to talk, as well as me taking time to talk. So you'll notice it, especially when you hear the first few episodes of this season. But it's just about sitting down and just having good talk, good conversation. Pass the message. Y'all know they ain't going nowhere. If you know, you know. If you've been around for a while, you already know how we give it up. But just hang in there. The content's amazing. The moves are even more amazing. And just put yourself in the right headspace to get this information. So hope y'all enjoy. What's going on? How's everyone doing? Episode 380 of The Pass is here. I'm your host, BT, with yet another episode. Before I go into this episode, I want to, I know I already gave him his credit and accolades while he was on the show, but I want to send a big thank you, huge support, much appreciation to Nashawn, Jarrell, however you want to term it, name it. He was a guest on the show last week. Show got quite a bit of traction in a good way. Like, a lot of people listen to that show. I'm definitely appreciative of that. Ironically, probably a day or two after we recorded, because we talked about it on show, I believe, he is in the process of getting ready to start his podcast, and we've kind of already talked about it without it being talked about, of, hey, like, once you're settled, situated, however it needs to be, I definitely am open to coming on as a guest, because a lot of people don't realize or don't take into account, as much as I love recording and doing shows, I think the one thing I like more than that is being a guest on a show. And I think I'm trying to think about it, because in the last 7 years, I can probably count on one hand, if that, how many times I've been on a show as a guest. So like I said, I don't recall being invited on a show yet, but I could be wrong. Someone probably can refresh my memory and say, yeah, you were on the show when we talked about X, Y, and Z. I mean, if you put in or factor in the times of me being like guest, producer, involver with my Asia's podcast, Let's Talk About It, yeah, you can count that in. But otherwise, I don't think I've been like pulled in for a show yet. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that and seeing what that all entails. I will go ahead and get what I call the unique bells and whistles out of the way for this show. And when I say that, I reference it as this may be a unique podcast. One, if you're noticing, obviously the title will tell everything. However, I'm sitting with news, so I'm kind of like, at any point, I don't know if I will. I may get a call about it. I may get updates on it after I'm finished. I'm not sure, but just be available for your family. I think that's the early message I'm gonna give for today's show. You hear the phrase, you hear the term, how life is short and how we need to really, value life while we have it. or value those we have while they're here. You sometimes don't really get the intensity of that, or what makes that such a, I want to say controversial, conflicting dialogue, but just what makes it more eye-opening than normal. And that's something lately that I'm really beginning to see that I have to do a much better job of taking advantage of. So I want to get that on the table and in the dialogue before I really get into like a major unpack. Because there's stories that I had to talk about, but I also wanted to kind of just give some general dialogue before I go into that, before I go into the show. But I really, I've shared some of it with those who know me on a very personal level, kind of giving them the updates and what's what. But yeah, just be there, man. That's really the best thing I can tell people. Be there for those who've been there for you through your best, through your worst, your highs and your lows, your ebbs and your flows. That's really, like, that in and of itself could be a passive message inadvertently. But I wanted to start with that before I get into our topics of today. So without further ado, let's rock with it and make it flow. So I'm gonna start, like I always do. I said I was gonna do sports, and as I mentioned, we were gonna talk about the draft. So I'll go ahead and be fair and be real with you all. The early part of the draft I did not watch. I had a pretty active day on Thursday, and I will talk about that as well, because I want to make sure that I give brands and platforms their proper attention in TLC, along with some dialogue that was highly eye-opening from what was addressed. But like I said, I didn't watch really the early bit of the draft. I ended up, kind of being out and about, and the obvious, Wembanyama went number 1. He went to the Spurs. They've already done like the press with him and San Antonio, kind of looking at his future with coming to the team. There is and I want to make sure I say these words cautiously but transparently. There's a fair amount of pressure on Wembanyama, but on the same token, I think that he will be able to show up in the way that he needs to for playing. So we'll call it what it is and make a good conversation out of the draft as a whole. Now they did the mock draft. I want to know like the actual draft. Give me a sec. Okay, all right, cool, we got it. Yeah, because they kind of have it 1-on-1, but it's a couple differences. So I want to make sure I talk about everything and be protective of time with this draft. I need to figure out why the screen is not bright the way I want it to be. Yeah, no, I'm always, even when I'm not trying to do something technical related, it always somehow gets me to become technical related, where it's like, all right, what's going on? But while I'm working on that, I'll be real with y'all and let you know, like, this wasn't like a horrible, like, I didn't have like a ooh and ah factor behind the draft. It was what I expected. I mean, Wemby went first. The question was going to be whether it was going to be Scoot or Brandon Miller going second. And the Twins were the big talk. And then after that, it was kind of to say what I was saying, it was a free-for-all. A lot of players, quite a few names had unique positions on the board. One of whom I'll talk about now, Amari Bailey, he went to UCLA. He's going to Charlotte. Sometimes you have to wonder why why teams draft the way they do, and looking at, oh gosh, I just thought about something. I'm going to talk about that too. It's fun when you have a thought as you're like talking about something, because I do want to, I'll address a couple of trades too. So let me notate that as well. So yeah, Mari Bailey going to Charlotte when they already have LaMelo Ball. I'm like, I'm not sure if that works, but hey, maybe y'all know something I don't know. The thing that stands out, so Keontae Johnson, if you may or may not know his story, he went to Kansas State. He previously had played for Florida. In the early, I think it was like early part of the game, team took a timeout as they were coming back to the court. He collapsed. There wasn't any certainty if he would ever play basketball again. They kind of put him in like a development involvement with the Gators, and then he transferred to Kansas State, got them to the Final Four, made a pretty solid run there. But now he's in the NBA. He's going to be playing for OKC, which I'm pretty excited about that. Where's my guy? Imani Bates went a lot lower than people expected. He ended up going to the Cavaliers. I believe that was their only pick of the night. And yeah. Let me make sure I got his name right, because there's a kid who, I don't like messing up people's names, and yeah, y'all will catch all this typing today. Player of the year. So, Oscar Tshiebwe, who was the player of the year for in the NCAA, helped get Kentucky into a really good position tournament wise. They had a decent run. It wasn't the greatest run, but they did, they showed up. I start with that because it just, I don't know, like, you look at him and you're thinking, okay, why didn't he get picked up by anybody? And story comes out that, and ironically, he made history. He went undrafted. So over the past 2 years, Tshiebwe has been one of the top performers in all of college basketball, but apparently that didn't translate into getting his name called by Adam Silver. He went undrafted during the 2023 NBA draft and will now have to battle a lot harder to make a pro career if he doesn't return to college. Unfortunately, he hit a rare milestone in the process of going undrafted. Kentucky center is now the first player to ever win the prestigious Naismith Player of the Year award and go undrafted. Something ain't adding up. And I don't know if it's that he didn't show up or show out for in his draft workouts or pre-draft workouts or what happened. He was signed under a 2-way contract with the Fort Wayne Mad Ants as well as the Indiana Pacers. So he was able to get into get an opportunity in the league. My $1 million question is something that has popped up across my mind a little bit is how will it work for him? Like if he's going to be playing the summer league or if he's pretty much kind of going to be using that opportunity as like a press run without being a press run. I'm proud of Houston because we were able to get 2 pretty solid players in. We got one of the Thompson twins. We got Amen Thompson, and we also got Cam Whitmore, which a lot of people were shocked that Cam Whitmore went as low as he did in the draft because he played for Villanova, had a pretty solid career in Villanova. If anyone who knows or understands Villanova's rep, Villanova is not one of your one and done schools. If you go to Villanova, you're usually going to be there for a year or so. And I mean, in his case, ironically, he came out after his freshman year, but he had a good performance or a good showing with Villanova. Also, everyone talked about Dick Grady. A couple reasons with him. One, everyone loved Grady Dick. They loved the jacket as far as it being a reference on or paying homage to Kansas since he played basketball there. Saying, we're not in Kansas anymore. Him going to Toronto, ironically, one of their colors being red. So that was a good look, a good work for him. Nothing else really stood out to me at the draft. A lot of draft picks were traded during the draft and based on other trades that had happened outside of the draft. Huge names that huge trades that occurred, because I believe one trade happened like right after we did the podcast. Bradley Beal went to Phoenix. No one's really seeing that equating to a championship. And I'm sorry, before I forget, that's mainly all I have for like draft coverage or the NBA draft as a whole. If I were put in a position to truly rank the draft or really look at the draft overall, it always comes back to me, and I always feel like I bring up this conversation every couple of years of let's see what they do, and let's come back to this conversation in say 4 or 5 years and what happens. Because right now, a lot of your number one picks are always like a what if, or it would have been nice if type of thing. Like Karl Anthony Towns, he thinks he's changed to revolutionize basketball. Ben Simmons, we don't know when he'll be back on the court. Anthony Bennett kind of had like a here today, gone today career. And Andrew Wiggins won a championship. Became a very key role player for Golden State. I think if they had him more during the regular season, I know he had personal stuff going on, but the more that you can have a player available, the bigger that it plays a part into your potential playoff run. So I think that would have been a big difference maker. Speaking of difference makers, like I said, Bradley Beal was traded to the Suns, ironically, for not much anything. Like they really kind of didn't really have to give much back. I believe now, I mean, their bench is pretty depleted now. I'm gonna make sure I give y'all the right information, because that would not be a good podcaster. Let's see. So the Suns received. Okay, so let me make sure I'm giving you all the right trade, because there was that trade that happened and then another trade happened right afterwards. So the Suns received Bradley Beal, Jordan Goodwin, and Isaiah Todd. The Wizards received Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, 6 second-round picks for the 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, and 2030 season. And there were 4 pick swaps for 24, 26, 28, and 30. Then after that, Chris Paul was traded to Golden State for Jordan Poole, right around with all of the money stuff going on and figuring out how to, if they were going to look to give him a possible max contract. So he really didn't stay. He really didn't, because there was the talk of the story was that Chris Paul going to Washington, if he had played, that him, John Wall, and Russell Westbrook would have played for all 3 of the same teams, which was Washington Wizards, Houston Rockets, and LA Clippers. But he ended up not going to. He really wasn't even in Washington or with Washington, but for a few days. My guess, it might be a stretch, but I think the uprooting factor might have played a part in him not having to do as immense or as heavy of a move. Just my take on that. Porzingis went to Boston. They pulled it off as a 3-way trade involving Tyus Jones as well as Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart ended up being his 9-year tenure with Boston came to an end. Putting it into perspective, their draft class really doesn't get talked about enough. That was the same class that Andrew Wiggins was in. You had Wiggins, you had Julius Randle, you had I like little things like this. I always like to talk about because it's very mind blowing when you really think of who came out or who played in what season or things of that nature. 2014 draft class. Number 1 pick was, interestingly enough, who else was in that draft class? Nikola Jokic. So yeah, Wiggins was the first overall pick. Couple names to kind of give you some ideas. Andrew Wiggins, Jabari Parker, Joel Embiid, Aaron Gordon, Dante Exum, who we haven't heard from in who knows how long, Marcus Smart, Julius Randle, Nick Stauskas, Noah Vonleh, Elfrid Payton, who I don't think is in the league right now, Doug McDermott, who is still getting a fair share of role play in the NBA, Dario Saric, Zach LaVine. Like, that's how deep of a class this was. Like, I think this class we need to circle back and talk about this class again. Like, some of these guys are still holding a pretty solid role in the NBA. Even Gary Harris, I think he's with the Magic right now. And, you know, it's always those interesting what ifs, like if he had still been with Denver, would they be as solid of a team as they are now? And it's kind of like a who knows type of thing. 41st pick of that draft, Nikola Jokic. 25th, Clint Capella. Trying to think of some other big names that we can. Jeremy Grant still in the league, still being talked about. Jordan Clarkson, who's made quite a fair share of six-man appearances of talk. Like not a bad class overall in my opinion. But yeah, the Porzingis going to Boston is going to be good. Hopefully he'll be able to fulfill his role in Boston, along with the fact that he'll stay healthy. I think that's the biggest eye opener, or biggest thing that always comes up with a lot of players, especially a player such as Kristaps Porzingis. One other basketball talk. I'm gonna give my take about this because I really didn't get the full gist. I wish I had known it was a space. I would have went in just to listen, not really to speak, but to listen, because you can get a very unique room read when it comes to players just being who they are. So a content creator who does a fair amount of basketball talk was in, or set up a Twitter space. And in the Twitter space, it was referencing that Kevin Durant was not top 5 of players in the NBA currently. And so this then led to, after that room was created, oddly enough, Kevin Durant comes into the room and gives his thoughts on this experience of, you know, him looking at who his top 5 are. So I think the gentleman mentioned his 5 were, let me make sure I got this right. He had Embiid, Luka, Jokic. I can't remember the other 2 players he mentioned. He might have said Tatum. I don't remember. But he didn't have, the main point is he did not have Durant as one of his top 5. And what's so tough about this, and I think this is something that I feel is so key, even as someone who does a podcast and talks about sports from time to time, meriting or measuring players based on different accolades or different criteria is so challenging, because 5 people, like right now where I'm at in the library, I could bring 5 people in here who are fans of basketball, and all 5 of them will have a different top 5, because there's going to be different things that you're measuring or factoring in when considering who is that top 5 player. A top 5 player can look different for a lot of people for a lot of reasons, and it wouldn't be invalid in looking at a player not being, like, I think there was one stat of breaking down where Durant doesn't draw as much contact as far as him creating shots to get to the free throw line. Now, my trade-off for that is Durant is more of a shooter, also a sniper, also a scorer. But his scoring is not with the intent of trying to get to the basket, because if we really look at his basketball career, times that he drove hard to the basket, that's where those injuries come into play. That's where that's where those shortening careers have been like a big deal. I think too, and something else that isn't really looked at, a lot of the guys who are on the list are all, like, most of them have, if not at some point, had a big scoring game, or a big, like, oh, they put up like 50 plus, or they put up 60 plus. Durant has said on record and has mentioned this in dialogue that he is not someone who is out there to try to get like a high scoring game. Like his highest career like points in a game is 55. He's not a person who's like trying to push for a 60. He doesn't push for a 70. We haven't seen any 80s obviously since Kobe, late great. But he look, because you have to look at it as a lot of players who get those high scoring games don't win them. Like Durant's goal and objective is to win. Like he makes that very clear. As far as his scoring and his shooting, his efficiency, he's a big, and I might be reaching what I'm about to say, but he's a big stickler in the efficiency and the factor of it being a win. Because I mean, I personally, and I think I've talked to people about this before, two stats that are very challenging to define or discuss but are relevant to the discussion are what we look at as the plus minus, as well as the player efficiency rating. Like a PER can be like that talk, but a lot of people don't look at those stats because it's so like, I mean, it said something, but it didn't say something. But it comes down to like who's making that impact when the game is on the line. Because I mean, if you look at a lot of games, the game can be, okay, the team is getting blown out by 20 in the third quarter, 25, and they head into the fourth quarter. It can be a switch that's like a team can go on a 25-0 run. I don't want to say 25-0 run, like a 13-2 run. Like those small runs like that, or those small like gasps of air for teams can be like the difference maker of who gets that credit and who doesn't get that credit. So I thought it was like, I gotta give him his credit for being able to know that a room was being created about him, and he literally went in with his actual Twitter account and like gave his thoughts and his discussion and or his feelings about the whole storyline, the whole situation. So huge props to him on that. As far as it goes with me, like I respect that. And if y'all caught that bump just now, my bad. I'm sorry. It wasn't on purpose. I promise. So next week, by the time I'm recording, I may do a show Saturday. I might do it on Sunday. I don't know yet. But by the time that show gets recorded, it will be July, aka we're kind of in it now, considering the second half of 2023. So I want to give a bit of a reflection and an overview of the year so far. Just mine. And I'm not going to make this long-winded. It's not going to be like, oh my God, you're going to tell us about your whole life. No, it's not that. I just want to personally say that the first half of this year really has shown me the importance of intention, number one. Number two, and most importantly, I've really been put in a position to have to read the room in ways that I didn't know I could read the room. But when your option is put on the table of, hey, you got to read the room, it's like, all right, I got to read the room. And at first, I didn't think much of that or didn't really see it as a big deal. But as time has progressed and as I've slowly matured and paid attention to routines, paid attention to habits, paid attention to patterns, it's become more evident that you really have to know where you are and where things are with what you're doing and how your routine can fluctuate over time, among other things. And you don't think much of it, or you don't really look at it as a big deal in theory, but in the long run, it's like, I understand now why this is important. I get why the effort has to be placed on insert thing here. So I will, like, my accomplishment by far was starting this role as a software engineer. Many of my friends have been saying it, and I've been valuing it, and they're like, it's about time. And I'm like, listen, you looking at it as it's about time, and I'm looking at it like, yo, what's next? Like, what we got, what we doing, what we working on, how we trying to improve, how we trying to build, how we trying to brand. And that's literally been like the mantra without being the mantra of just improvement and betterment at all costs without leaving anyone or anything behind, and what that looks like. So I'm definitely more in tune and more aware of how important it is. I'm looking outside, I'm like, is it raining? Before I continue, because I can make fun with this now. Like, a friend of mine, he's been on the show. Actually, he's been on a couple of shows. He was on my Year in Review podcast back in December, Wyatt was, and I had him on as a guest where we did a show. We're looking to get back on the show. I think we're going to do one soon within the next month or two, to possibly be about, it may be about some personal stuff that he's experienced, but also maybe related to some security/tech tips that I don't think people are aware how important they are. And I'll kind of leave it at that. But I bring him up because we were talking and he brought up an interesting spinoff that I never really looked at the time. But in theory, I was like, I wish I had did it at the time and it would have been a lot better. At that particular point, I think I was still like in my infancy stage with the podcast. So my comfort level wasn't very combative with what happened, because we were talking and, you know, I was doing a podcast, and as I was talking, like, someone in the background is like, I can't find my t-shirt. And I was so quick to like abruptly end the show. And I'm like, so my teachable moment from then versus now is, if I were to be in that position again, it would probably be me making more mockery of it, let alone probably doing my famous phrase where I mute the mic like I just did, say what I need to say and get back to what I had to say, and also address what just happened. So everything's about evolution and about growing. So, and that's, I share that, but I also tie it into the current discussion, because second half is all about expectation. Just setting realistic expectations. You know, people a lot of times, our habit is, you know, we got to set these high expectations, and you got to do this, knock this out. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you also want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success, not failure. And an added or relevant piece of that, like even today, before doing this podcast, which I wrote, I started the process of writing a lot of this down. I'm going to write more between tonight as well as tomorrow. I have a list of things I need to get answers to and figure out. And I have like a book that I'm allotting for, like, look, let's write out this blueprint. Let's make this a thing. Cause I've been playing with the emotions of myself and what I'm capable of doing. And I feel like this always comes up as a topic each week when I do a podcast on my own. But I feel like this time I have a stronger fire in place for what I'm trying to work on and how I wanted to get it done. So just setting the proper expectations. What do I expect from myself? What should others expect from me? What does the table look like? How are we going to get this to happen? Also got some helpful tips on some reconfiguration with branding and business, the business process. Most importantly, and I'll talk about this a little bit because I did write it already. Thursday, I mentioned it earlier that I was at an event. The event was called the Network. It's the Network Incubator is the name of the page, and I will make sure that they are in the show, that I have their Instagram, make it the other socials in there too, for what they're working on. It's good to, so it's interesting because I like now, 11 years later, getting a visual of what Meet Your Tweet was and its intent, along with, you know, many other companies and many other venues fulfilling similar responsibilities. In 2012, I didn't have a business. I was mainly pushing or promoting that I was a blogger, and I was establishing a foundation for being a creative. I didn't have the creative effort was there, but I wasn't using the creative effort properly. And I'm blaming no one for that. I'm not sitting here like, oh, woe is me, I'm looking for pity. It's just when you realize like, oh, so this is what I was supposed to be sharing, and this is how I'm supposed to be getting this out to other people. Noted, got it, heard you, let's make it happen. And that's pretty much what it's been now, where you have to know with what you're sharing, what comes with it, the pros, the cons, the ins and outs, the ebbs and flows, like I said earlier, and not be so dismissive to that process, because sometimes we put ourselves in this position of, I'm looking for something to do this at this point. And it's like, you gotta let it ruminate. You gotta let it evolve. You gotta let it develop. If it doesn't do those things, then it's not going to go the way that you quote unquote would like it to go. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but you don't want to flip it or turn it into it becoming the end of the world. Because a lot of times people do that, and it's like, did you really need it to be to that point? Like, was it worth it? Is more of like, more or less the bigger question than anything else. So yeah, the network incubator event was solid. Met some amazing people. I had 2 takeaways personally, and I think I'm going to implement this again, is to generate a single QR code and have that QR code be my content or network connection for business. Because I've been finding that I'm getting people to link up with me and plan stuff out on working on things, but then there's the ghosting, the abandonment, which I followed someone who does a podcast at One Time in Business, and she unpacks this very well. I will link her podcast as well. But just making sure that I'm doing my part, which I'm gonna, like I said, I have to write that out as well. I'm getting like a more fluid format, like the questionnaire. I think the questionnaire works, but I also think the questionnaire is very non-personable. And me being who I am with my business, I feel as though being personable is what's going to be the winning formula. I might be wrong, but that's what I've gathered so far. So we'll see what that looks like, or how that all turns out in the long run. Integration update, still got to finalize that. I have placed on paper what my options are going to be. I may have already talked about it on the podcast. Spotify is going to be the main bay for music. Apple will be second in command. Podcasts will predominantly be in the podcast app, so I don't get confused. Now, the exception to that is some podcasts aren't on Apple Podcasts, which is okay. In the event of that, I will still stick with them being on Spotify. I've actually wrote a couple days ago, I wrote out a list of all of the podcasts that I follow or subscribe to on Spotify, which means they're going to be going over to the podcast app, and I will be managing them there. And I'll look to work on that over the next couple of days, and just looking up each podcast and just seeing, okay, this podcast is there, this podcast isn't there, and just taking notes accordingly. For note taking, I'm going to see how I'm going to do this, but I have to do it soon, which is to get the notes off of Google Keep and put them onto Notes. So I'm going to be making Notes my main bay. So Notes is going to be pretty stacked, which will then impact my cloud storage, which shouldn't be a lot, but it's still like things to think about in that avenue. Reminders, I'm leaving the default reminders app, and I like the default reminders app. Do not get me wrong on that. But I want to look at what I've been reminding myself of, removing those things, and then really looking at what do I genuinely need to put as a reminder and or a task, and using Things 3 for that specific purpose. So like Things 3 every week, regardless, is going to say plan out week. And it's like, I can't sit here and keep saying I'm going to plan out the week and don't plan nothing. Like, this doesn't make sense. So getting those proper pieces integrated for that is going to be very important to look into as well. I'm trying to think of what other things I need to get into motion or get to cracking, because I don't want to more than anything, I just don't want to burn or push time that should not be pushed to the side, I guess is where I'm at about it. I need to make sure trash. I'm gonna look because I need to see where I have these that are the ones that are already set as like presets or whatever. I'm surprised I'm still using that email, but anyway. Gonna think about that as well as some other things. So me talking about this now is just kind of like my personal update. If I have not worked on it by the time of me editing the podcast, this will be a reminder. So you all are just kind of listening in as I'm thinking out loud. So you're welcome. Let's see. Talked about the network incubator, talked about trades, talked about expectations, talked about the integration. All right. 3 tools integrate or play and party nice with each other. They are pen, paper, and plan. I'm pulling this from my friend Special's playbook. So if any of you hear this and you talk to Special, you can send her the podcast by all means. She may be listening low key, and if she is, I appreciate it because I'm gonna give you your credit because it's helped me, and it's almost been my pay it forward to others in so many words. Getting a pen, getting a notebook or a piece of paper are the most convenient and simplest foundations to planning and preparing your life. I did not need to buy $2 3-subject notebooks from Walmart. However, they were available, and interestingly enough, I have a spare 5-subject notebook sitting at home that I'm not using, along with a spare 5-subject notebook sitting in my car that I am not using. But because I'm always talking to people about how important it is to plan, voila, here we are. So I say all of that just to say, if you are really invested in really wanting to get the ball rolling with planning out your ideas, make those small investments. I think the pens that I found in Walmart, it was like a 2-pack. It might have been $3. So, and anyone, again, it's not about you. Everyone has their preference of pens and what to write with. But if you're at that lowest of low and you're trying to start off and figure out what to do and where to start, these are my 2 starting points 9 times out of 10. I think I've shared this story multiple times on the podcast. 2022, the beginning of 2022, and nearly a vast majority of 2022, I tried digital planning. And I think digital planning is good. Digital planning has its pros and cons, however. Just like manual, writing by hand. Writing by hand, the disadvantage of writing by hand is you have to make sure you're in an area that's well lit. And I know that's like, well, what do you mean by that? Or what's the big deal of that? If you have a tablet, the screen is on. So as long as your screen is on, you can write your little heart away. However, if you're using a iPad or a Galaxy tablet, whichever tablet you prefer to use, this is not me turning this into Android versus iPhone. I don't have the energy for that. I was having this conversation with someone earlier today and sharing this. Android and iPhone is the least of y'all worries with a battle. The battle now is Teams versus Zoom, because some companies are making you use Teams. Some companies are more preferably using Zoom. And it's like watching the paint dry between which is better and which is worse is so torturous on every single level known to man. And I'll leave it at that. But with all of that being said, writing, like using the digital option can be good, but if you don't have the affordability to use an Apple Pencil, or you don't have the demand of using certain applications to manage your files or your documents, it can become a little tedious. It can be a little annoying. Like last year, and I tried it. I'm here to tell you all, I tried it. I did digital journaling, and it did not appeal very well to me, for the simple fact that you're writing on you're writing on your iPad. You can write it out and get all your thoughts on paper. If the page gets full, you can make a duplicate of the page, clear everything out. But then it's like, unless you have that stored somewhere, unless you're really gonna go back and retain and look at that, it's there, but you don't. The feel for it is not as true and pure in that regard. Along with the fact, and I've said this numerous times, and I've had someone actually say this to me, and it happened to them. So I can personally speak on this being a thing, and that is, a person is wanting to say, "Oh, I'm going to write down my thoughts on an iPad." Well, my iPad's dead, so I can't write anything, and it's like, that doesn't really help the cause to have it. But hey, that was the digital option. That's the trade-off. So it's just those things that are looked at but not fully considered is why I'm really like huge about that split between, which avenue. But for your traditional routine, like everything that we've been talking about so far, I've really sat here and I'm like, oh shoot, I got to talk about trades, or I need to talk about the network incubator. Like, I'm writing it down because you want to get, like, a habit that will be a helpful habit is to keep a pen and paper available. Speaking of pen and paper, and I'm going to switch back to tech real quick because y'all know I'm always in my head thinking. There will be a group. There's a group that I've actively created, which I'm going to get the information shared for that today. Matter of fact, and y'all are getting this right on podcast because it's me being me, and it would not be any other way if I did it this way. Let's see. So, got that. Let's see, what are all my groups? Space to Tech. So I'm going to keep this up on my screen, and I will be giving some information because I don't have a description. I haven't really done any of the identity specifics with that, so I'll do that once we're finished recording. Got that off the table. All right. Message to pass along, thought to pass along, ways to help you become a better you. Your race is your race. And a lot of times we find ourselves trying to compete with people who are not in our race. We know what we are trying to do, and we know how to get to what we're trying to do. Now, if you have folks who are helping you and supporting you in what you're trying to do, value the support, receive the support, and most of all, use the support. However, and this is a big however, do not make competition where there is no competition. And there's two ways to look at that. The obvious is if you and someone you know are both doing graphic and web design, don't look at them as a competitor. Look at them as an opportunity, because if you're not where you are with what you should be doing, you may be able to get some ideas or get a general consensus on where to start, what they've done to be successful and what you could do to be successful. And what tools do you have in place that may be able to help them? Like, I've talked about it I talked about her earlier. The podcast at One Time in Business, her academy, she did a 5-part book series that I have. I need to read those, even though, and they're very small, like quick ebooks, and they're helpful. I know for a fact that as soon as I read them, I'm going to be like, oh my God, she just called me out. Let's make it happen. But it's literally, it comes down to the person needing the help to say, I need help and I need to allot the time. But your race is still your race. And why I'm saying that and using it in that regard, and I guess the other factor of it is just not like valuing the resources and the connections. Don't battle with the resources. The resources are the resources for a reason. And we sometimes don't invest enough time in seeing or realizing that because we're so busy fighting against the resources instead of utilizing the resources. Like help is called help for a reason, not this might be the message. I'm going to let that still rock of the race, running a race and all that. But this is probably going to be the message because I had to I had to learn this myself. Do not feel as though you're an inconvenience to people or that you're bothering someone. There's this thing that we do, and we all have done it, where we sit and we say, I don't want to be a bother. I don't want to inconvenience you. Hopefully I'm not interrupting you. After they say the word you, they are going to bother you. They are going to interrupt you. They are going to talk to you, and they're going to need help. So 2 things with that as the person who's providing the help. Be the help. Help that person. They know they need help, and you want to be as best of a helper to them in every way possible. But to the person who's asking for the help, don't sit and don't project what someone else is doing. And I think people do that so much they don't realize, like, give me a chance to factor in whether I can or can't help. And then we can figure out what we're going to do or how we're going to do everything. But until then, not pushing the narrative or the idea of like what a person is going to be or when they're going to do something is just it's not fair. And sometimes we, as people, we spend a lot of time pushing against what someone is or isn't doing and not taking the accountability off the table and realizing like, hey, give things their proper time and like work with someone instead of against them. And I think at times we're so busy working against people that we don't need to work against. And everyone, the right people in your circle, in your routine or whatever the case may be, they're gonna be the ones who are going to like put you in that challenging / discomforting position, even when you don't want to be in that position. And at times you need, like, as people, whether we claim it or realize it or not, we need the discomfort in order to make us better people. And that's really the best message I can give on that. I know I was like all over the place with where I'm going with that, but just the reality is stop assuming that you're a burden to someone and you haven't even like checked with the person if they have the ability and or the capacity to do it. Like, folks, if a person is available to you and can do something, they're gonna make it clear to you whether they can or can't do it. And as people, we know that, but we sometimes are so busy trying to like almost trying to think for other people and not give them the opportunity to think. And that becomes in my opinion, a very unfair shake, to say the least, because it's no fair to me to give me the opportunity on how to feel about something or how to react to something, and I haven't even like taken time to like really see where I'm at with what I want to do or how I want to help you. Because you've already made it clear. Well, I mean, I know you got a whole lot going on. I always have a whole lot going on. What do you need? How can I help you? Like, it's not that kind of party. Like, you don't call a company's help desk to feel like you're being an inconvenience or a bother. You call them because you're needing help with something. You don't reach out to a company for customer service if you didn't need customer service. Like, there's a reason, like there's a trade-off of the need, the supply, the demand, all of those things. That's why companies invest in customer service and help desks for a reason, because the more that something can be fixed internally, the less likely you are to have someone leave a company's business or service due to lack of help. So value the help, ask for the help. And the helper, whoever the person is that's helping people, be of help and be open to helping people. Don't feel like when somebody comes to you, it's like, oh gosh, what do they want now? Because that then generates a tension-based dialogue between you and that person. And that person's gonna be like, no, I'm not gonna go to them, because they're gonna make like a big fuss over feeling like I bothered them for help, when it was like, I just needed to ask a question. Like, people ask questions because they want to know something. They may not be an answer. They want to know something. They want to get an idea. They want to get a perspective. They want to make sense of it all. And that's literally what it comes down to. So as I mentioned before, do with that as you will. Don't let anybody stop you from shining. Have your people that support you, support yourself. And I said this at the beginning, do not ignore where family is in your life and in your routine, because they're gonna need you just as much as you need them, and you want to be in a space that's a loving, opening space by any means possible. All right. So until next time, this is The Pass. Again, this is your host BT, and we will be back to do this again on next week. It's early, but I'm still in limbo. I'll share this and then we're gonna wrap up. I'm still in limbo. I'm likely going to do weekly picks for the NFL. I'm trying to figure out, do I want to do preseason or just wait until regular season? The only problem is whenever regular season comes up, I'll be like, oh, so that means it throws me into the tight spiral space where literally on Saturdays I would have to record. So that way I'd have to record Saturday, make sure it's uploaded by Saturday so that you all hear it, and then y'all can talk smack about, oh, he did not call any of these games. He don't know what he's doing. And that's okay. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there, but I just wanted to share that. Oh, and one last thing while I'm thinking about it while I'm here. I want y'all to take into consideration about how important things are when they come full circle. Where I'm recording today, I have not been in this venue or this facility since I had somewhat of a traumatic experience. Long story less long, someone took my phone when I was here, but I also left my phone in an open area, so I learned my lesson for that part. The bigger reason why I'm sharing this is because if you were to ask me a while ago to come back here and like do an interview or do a podcast, I'd have been like, nope, I'm cool. I don't want to come back. I'm all right. I'll just suck it up. Today, I'm learning the importance of just facing things and just not being so caught up in what is or what isn't. And that's literally what this is all about. I'm really hoping this audio is showing because there's nothing on my screen. But definitely things that you've experienced and things that you go through, don't let those experiences be permanent. Allow them to be temporary. That's all I got. All right, y'all. Catch y'all on the next one. Another episode is completed. Thank you all for listening. If you want to check out the podcast, you can go to buzzsprout.com. If you're looking to do podcasts, you can go to buzzsprout.com. To get to my podcast, you'll go to thepastbtpod.buzzsprout.com. If you're looking at getting a microphone, I always suggest getting the Blue Yeti X. That is the microphone that I use. If you're starting off and you need something more affordable, Samson Meteor, it's a worthwhile investment. And there are other microphones that are going to be simple enough. My big suggestion I tell everyone whenever looking for a microphone, be sure that your microphone has the ability to have you listen to your audio or listen to yourself as you're talking. It will make a big difference in your editing and your podcast. Also, most importantly, and I tell people this is a tip offline, but I'm giving this in the final listen or at the end of the show. Drink water while recording, and also just drink water in general. But drink water while you're recording, and the reason why, you'll be surprised. All right. See y'all on the next show.